I never imagined that my grandfather's funeral would mark the beginning of a war. One moment, tears were falling from the pain of loss. The next, the entire room was engulfed in suffocating silence. Not because of a farewell speech, but because of the announcement pulled from a cold gray envelope. The will had just been opened, and from that moment on, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. As the lawyer cleared his throat, every pair of eyes turned to him, tense, curious, and waiting. But none of them were prepared for what he was about to say. Especially not my mother. All assets, including shares in Carter Holdings and the mansion in Green Hill, will be transferred to my only granddaughter, Olivia Carter. I froze. So did everyone else in the room. Every breath seemed to be cut off for what felt like an eternity. I couldn't move. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Not because I hadn't hoped for it, but because I never thought my grandfather would actually do it. Leave the entire $120 million, 0 cents estate to me, instead of his own daughter, my mother. No one said a word until my mother abruptly stood up, her back straight like she'd been struck by lightning. She grabbed her husband's hand, her new husband, to be clear, and calmly, with a false serenity, said, through clenched teeth, "Well then, from now on, Douglas will run the company." I turned to her. "Excuse me? You're not ready for this responsibility, Olivia," my mother said as if it were an undeniable fact. "Douglas has 20 years of experience in business management. You just graduated. This isn't a game." I wanted to laugh, but my throat tightened. Douglas, the man my mother married 8 months ago. The man I never called stepfather because he never acted like one. The man who just a few months ago at dinner told me, "A 24-year-old girl isn't mature enough to lead a company, Olivia. You should learn to listen more." Now he stood there, dressed in an expensive suit, face cold as steel with a fake glued-on smile. The entire room, from aunts and uncles to a few board members present, seemed unfazed. As if everything had already been arranged. I felt like I had just walked into a play where I was the lead character, but no one wanted me to win. Douglas looked at me and smirked. "Olivia, you're a smart girl, but this is a billion-dollar company, not a high school project. You don't have the leadership background. Everyone knows this is beyond you." I clenched my fists. My palms were soaked in sweat, but I didn't take my eyes off him. The lawyer nodded and continued reading. "As per Mr. Carter's wishes, Olivia is not only the sole heir but also the 100% owner of Carter Holdings. All decisions regarding operations, management, and asset distribution belong solely to Ms. Olivia Carter, effective immediately." My mother slammed her hand on the table. "No way! This is a mistake. My father would never cut me out of the will." The lawyer didn't flinch. "Ms. Laura, this will was updated 6 weeks ago. Mr. Carter was fully conscious and lucid at the time of signing. There is a verified video recording, and notarized signatures from 3 legal witnesses." I still hadn't recovered. My head was spinning, but the silence suddenly became fuel. I remembered last summer when I sat beside him in the hospital. He held my hand and whispered, "Olivia, I believe in you. Don't let anyone take away what I've built." I hadn't fully understood his words then. But now, I understood more than ever. "This house," my mother shouted, "at the very least, it belongs to me. I grew up here." I looked around. The paintings, the bookshelves, the leather chair where he used to read the newspaper. All of it was now mine. Not because I claimed it, but because he had chosen it. I didn't take it. I was entrusted with it. I stood up, facing my mother directly for the first time in my life. "You're right," I said slowly. "You grew up here. But you lost his trust." "That's not my fault," Douglas interjected, still trying to maintain his composure. "Miss Olivia, if you're wise, you'll understand that power must come with experience. Let the adults handle it." I pressed my lips together. I knew they wouldn't stop here. But I also knew I wouldn't back down. My grandfather saw something in me that my mother never did, and I wouldn't let anyone take that away. Not Douglas, Not my mother, not anyone. The will reading ended in tense silence. No condolences, no sympathetic glances. I left the room with a heavy heart and trembling hands. But what I didn't expect was that the real storm had just begun. I had just stepped over the threshold of the Green Hill mansion where I had lived almost my entire life, when my mother's voice, sharp as a knife, rang out behind me. "Olivia, pack your things, you're no longer allowed to stay here." I froze. Then, turned to face her. "I am the legal owner of this house." "That's a mistake," she said coldly. "Your grandfather was manipulated. Someone made him believe you could handle this. But you can't. And this house doesn't belong to you." I didn't respond. I just looked into her eyes and saw the years of resentment bursting forth. She had never truly loved me. I knew that. But I never thought she would go this far. Douglas stepped in, hands in his pockets, face full of control. "We've talked it over, Olivia. You should leave. Things will go smoother if you cooperate." I smirked. "Smoother for who? For you? So you can run the company my grandfather left to me?" "Don't be disrespectful," my mother hissed. "This isn't a game. If you don't leave, I'll have my attorney file for illegal occupancy." I laughed. A dry, bitter laugh. "Do you really think you can win, when the will is legally binding?" She paused for a second, then furious, she pointed upstairs. "Go pack. You have 2 hours." Douglas stepped closer. "Listen, Olivia, be realistic. You're playing a game you don't even know the rules to. Don't let your pride make you lose everything. Walk away quietly. We'll let you keep a small portion of the estate as startup support." I looked at him like he had just offered to buy my soul. "I don't need your pity. And I'm not backing down from what's rightfully mine." I walked upstairs, my heart pounding, but my mind unusually clear. I locked my door, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally let the tears fall. Not from fear, but from disappointment. My family, the people who were supposed to protect me, were the first to stab me in the back. An hour passed in silence before a loud knock shook the door. I didn't answer. "Olivia, open the door!" my mother shouted. "You're making this worse." Still, I stayed quiet. Every move now was a double-edged sword. I needed to think clearly. I opened my phone and called my grandfather's lawyer. The one who had read the will that morning. "Mr. Miller, I need help. They're threatening to kick me out of the house." His voice was calm, as if he had expected this. "Miss Olivia, legally you are the rightful owner. No one has the authority to force you out. If they continue, I will immediately request a court order to protect your property." "Thank you, I'll stand my ground." I hung up and took a deep breath. I knew my mother and Douglas wouldn't stop with just threats. And right on cue, 30 minutes later, the police showed up. 2 officers stood at the door, knocking a second time. I opened it, keeping my expression as calm as possible. "We received a call regarding a property dispute," one of them said. "Ms. Laura Carter claims you're here illegally." I handed them a copy of the ownership documents. "This house now legally belongs to me. This is the notarized, legally binding will." They examined the papers carefully, exchanged a glance, and then turned to my mother, who stood behind them. "Ma'am, according to this documentation, the property was legally transferred to Ms. Olivia. We have no authority to interfere with her right to remain here." My mother looked like she'd been slapped. She was speechless. Douglas turned away, his face darkening. I gently closed the door, my chest burning. I couldn't believe they had actually called the police to throw me out of my own home. There was no more doubt. They would stop at nothing to take everything from me. That night, I locked my bedroom door and drew the curtains shut. I couldn't sleep. Every little sound startled me. I knew they wouldn't give up. And I needed to prepare. One question kept looping through my head. What would they do next? I started taking notes, making plans, and preparing for the real battle, not just for the property, but for the voice and position my grandfather entrusted to me. I never thought I'd see the day I had to prepare for a battle. against my own mother. But at this point, with all signs pointing to a carefully orchestrated scheme, I had no choice. When the morning light filtered through my bedroom window, I sat upright with a clear sense of purpose. I had to expose the truth. Not out of revenge, but to protect what my grandfather believed in. I began piecing events together. 8 months ago, my mother remarried Douglas, a man who had been fired from 2 companies for poor investment decisions. No one in my family knew that, except my grandfather. And now, he had left everything to me. That wasn't a coincidence. I opened the notebook my grandfather once gave me, the one I always brought to the hospital. Inside, he had recorded meticulous notes on every company activity. But on the last page, I found a line handwritten in black ink. If you're reading this, you need to know. Douglas didn't marry your mother for love. He came for the money. I clutched the notebook, my body electrified. He knew. He had known all along. And I couldn't sit back while they carried out their scam. That afternoon, I walked into the offices of Carter Holdings, the place that would soon become the true battlefield. The receptionist looked at me confused, but still guided me to the boardroom. When I opened the door, Douglas was already there, sitting at the center of the table as if he owned the place. Beside him was my mother, her hand resting dramatically on his shoulder, as if to declare, "This is the one in charge now." They looked at me like I was the troublemaker, the child ruining their grown-up dream. But I was ready. "I thought you were advised to take a few months off, Olivia," Douglas said evenly, like he was toying with me. "I didn't come to listen to you," I replied coldly. "I came to address a few things you two have been scheming behind my back." My mother stood up, her face flushed with anger. "Olivia, what are you talking about? I only wanted to help you avoid destroying everything your grandfather built." I looked her straight in the eyes. "No. You wanted to take back what he didn't leave to you. And you used Douglas as your pawn to do it." The room went silent. Douglas let out a mocking laugh. "Are you accusing me of something? Without evidence, your words are just childish fantasy." I placed my grandfather's notebook on the table and flipped to the last page. My grandfather didn't leave everything to me out of a mistaken belief. He left it to me because he knew exactly who you are, and so do I. I pulled out my phone and tapped on an audio file. "Remember the night you spoke with someone named Marcus Jenkins, Douglas?" His face turned pale, my mother's expression shifted too. "Marcus," I continued, "is the investment director at a rival firm, and this is the recording of your call offering him a plan to jointly control Carter Holdings if I could be removed from power." I played the audio. Douglas's voice rang out loud and clear. "She's still too green. She can't handle the pressure. I'll talk to Laura and get us a way in. Then you and I can run the whole thing." Douglas went ghost white. He stood up, reaching to shut the phone off, but I raised a hand. "I've already sent copies to my lawyer, legal counsel, and the press." My mother trembled. "Olivia, you're ruining my reputation." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You ruined it when you chose to stand by a man who only cared about money. I needed you once, but you never chose me." Douglas collapsed back into his chair, speechless. The room was filled with stunned and disappointed faces. People who once doubted me, but now had no choice but to believe. I stepped into the center of the room, meeting every eye. "I know I'm young, I know I lack experience, but I know this company. I followed my grandfather for 4 years, I learned from him, from every meeting, every report, every mistake he shared, and he chose me, not because I'm his granddaughter, but because I'm the only one he trusted to protect his legacy." I turned to my mother, my tone calm but resolute. "I don't need you to help run this company, I need you to stop sabotaging it." She said nothing. Douglas was silent. The whole room held its breath. I stood tall, feeling lighter. For the first time, I was no longer the quiet shadow at the edge of family meetings. I was at the center of the storm. And I wasn't backing down. The air in the boardroom was heavy, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out. After the audio clip, no one spoke. Douglas's arrogance was gone. My mother slumped in her chair, pale and lifeless. The board members exchanged glances of disbelief and shock. Mr. Miller, the longtime lawyer of my grandfather, quietly stood up. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a carefully sealed envelope, placing it on the polished wooden table in front of me. "Mr. Carter left behind a handwritten letter," Mr. Miller said, each word firm and deliberate. "He instructed me to read it only in the event of conflict or confusion regarding the will, and I believe that time has come." I gave a small nod, my hands clenched in my lap, overwhelmed with mixed emotions: grief, anger, and a nameless anxiety. I had prepared for everything, except this final message, from the only person who never turned his back on me. Mr. Miller opened the envelope and pulled out a sheet of paper written in a familiar script. My grandfather's handwriting. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the room, then began to read. "Olivia, if you're hearing these words, it means I'm no longer here. And perhaps your mother is so angry right now she's about to slam the table again. Don't be afraid. I've seen it happen hundreds of times." A few people chuckled awkwardly, but most remained silent. "I'm not writing this to justify myself, but to clarify. Your mother, Laura, is my biological daughter. I once loved her more than anyone, but love cannot blind us to what we see and hear. For 30 years I hoped, forgave, and waited for her to grow mature enough to carry the weight of the family legacy. But what I received was selfishness, reckless spending, and a life driven by entitlement." My mother sat frozen, eyes wide open, but no one in the room stopped Mr. Miller from reading. "I cannot allow the work of my lifetime to fall into the hands of someone who views wealth as a tool to prove herself. I gave her chances. From the smallest managerial position to board representation, and each time, she failed. Not due to a lack of ability, but because of a lack of responsibility." Mr. Miller paused briefly, glancing toward my mother. She was trembling slightly. Douglas had his head bowed, as if hiding from the stares around the room. "As for you, Olivia, you never asked for anything. You never demanded that I give you a single thing. But it was that humility that caught my attention. I saw you in the office every summer break, quietly taking notes, asking questions, reading financial reports while your friends went to the beach. I pretended not to notice, but in truth, I saw everything." My throat tightened. I remembered those afternoons sitting with him in his office, when he told me, "Write down anything you find odd." I actually did it, never thinking he cared, but he had seen. And he remembered. "You're not perfect, Olivia, but you have something this family has lacked for years: dedication. You understand that a company is not just a place to make money, but a place to uphold values, honor, and responsibility. You don't need to fight to prove yourself. I watched you grow, and I know you deserve this more than anyone." The attorney paused, taking a deep breath before moving on to the final part. "Laura, if you're hearing this, understand that I'm not doing this out of hatred. I simply can't remain blind any longer. You've had every opportunity to make things right. But each time, you chose the easier path, and worse, dragged along men like Douglas to profit with you. I left you nothing, not because I forgot you, but because I can't entrust a legacy to someone who never valued it." No one spoke. Even those who had once sided with my mother on the board remained silent. They had heard enough, and it was too real. Mr. Miller folded the letter carefully, returned it to the envelope, and placed it back into his leather briefcase. I looked at my mother, the woman who used to hug me when I scraped my knees at age 10, who once braided my hair for the holidays, now sitting there in silence, hurt not by grief over her father's death, but by the loss of power. "I didn't think he could write something like that about his own daughter," my mother whispered, voice cracking. "He didn't understand me." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a child trying to win her approval. I replied slowly, "Maybe he understood you better than you understand yourself." Douglas tried to get up and leave, but Mr. Miller stopped him with one sentence. "Douglas, If you're thinking about contesting the will, I suggest you review the list of legal documents Mr. Carter left behind, including the video confirming his final intentions. Douglas froze. Every escape route had already been closed off. I left the boardroom without another word. Each step echoed down the long hallway of the company, affirming one truth. I was no longer the shadowy heir. I was the chosen one. And I would not allow my grandfather's legacy to be destroyed again. I thought everything would settle after my grandfather's letter. I naively believed that once the truth came out, they would give up, accept defeat. But I was wrong. Very, very wrong. 3 days after the board meeting, the media exploded. The front page of the New York Business Times showed a picture of me, with a confrontational headline. 25-year-old granddaughter takes over Carter Empire, bold move or disaster in the making. I froze when I saw it in the company lobby. But that was only the beginning. Evening news, online articles, investment forums, everywhere was flooded with pieces questioning my abilities. People who had never met me in their lives suddenly became experts, analyzing decisions I hadn't even made yet, predicting the collapse of the empire I had taken over less than a week ago. Lacks experience, lacks vision, riding on family ties. What can Olivia Carter do other than ruin her grandfather's legacy? Insider sources report. Major shareholders losing confidence in new leadership. A 25-year-old CEO with no prior management experience, is this Carter Holdings' biggest misstep yet? I knew exactly who was behind it all. Douglas and my mother. Unable to win through legal means, they pivoted to the weakest link: public image and trust. They didn't need to prove I was wrong, they only needed to plant doubt, and let the crowd do the rest. I called the legal department, but every article cited anonymous sources or close insiders. There was no basis for a lawsuit. I tried to stay calm, but my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Shareholders called, reporters called, employees called. People who had congratulated me days ago now returned with worried, skeptical looks. By the end of the day, I received an email from the board secretary. The subject line made my blood run cold. Request to convene special meeting for CEO position review vote. I stared at the screen, my hand clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. This was a coup, a calculated counterstrike. I printed the letter, walked straight into the empty boardroom and locked the door. Every footstep echoed, reminding me I was losing ground. Not because I was wrong, but because they knew how to twist the truth. I called Mr. Miller. I just received notice for a board meeting to vote on the CEO position, I said, my voice dry. Not surprising, he replied flatly. I suspect Douglas and Ms. Laura have been lobbying shareholders for days. They're targeting fear. It always works. What should I do? I asked, nearly defeated. Don't react just yet. They expect you to panic. But you have something they don't: your grandfather's preparation. And loyal allies. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Mr. Miller continued, voice steady and deep. You need to contact Lucas Sinclair. I opened my eyes wide. Lucas? He hasn't been with the company since my grandfather retired. True, but he still holds 6% of the shares. More importantly, your grandfather sent him a personal letter. He trusted him, should anything happen to you. I was speechless. Lucas Sinclair, the legend of the financial world, the man who once saved Carter Holdings from the brink of collapse in 2008. A man known for his toughness, candor, and unwavering loyalty to my grandfather. I didn't hesitate. I called him that very night. The phone rang 3 times before I heard a voice. Olivia Carter, I've been expecting your call for 3 days. I froze. You already know? You think anything happens in the investment world without me hearing about it? He chuckled, his voice tinged with disdain. Douglas and your mother think they can shift the narrative with a few rumors. They don't understand that in this world, people believe in actions, not words. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly. Will you help me? I'll do more than that. I'll rally the strategic shareholders who still believe in your grandfather's vision. But Olivia, only one person can stand up and protect the CEO position. And that person is you. I don't have time to be afraid, I whispered. Good, Lucas said. Because they won't hold back. I ended the call, opened my laptop and started drafting a counterattack plan. I wouldn't let them take the company with lies. I would stand up, openly, transparently, and silence every rumor with the truth. This was no longer about a granddaughter inheriting a company. This was a battle to protect a legacy. And I, Olivia Carter, would not lose. I met Lucas Sinclair that same night, in his office on the top floor of a glass skyscraper in the city center. There was no one else in the room but us. And everything, the atmosphere, the soft amber lighting, made me feel like this was no place for the faint-hearted. Lucas stood by the window, holding a glass of whiskey, staring down at the sea of lights below. When I entered, he didn't turn, just spoke in a gravelly tone. You arrived later than I expected, but still in time. I walked up to the desk and placed the folder I had prepared on the glass surface. They've issued notice of a board meeting to vote. I can't wait any longer. He set down his glass and looked me straight in the eyes. Douglas has already secured at least 3 major shareholders. If he wins one more, the vote tips in his favor. I know, I need your help to flip the numbers. Lucas nodded. Then let's begin. We worked through the night. Lucas wasn't just a financial expert, he was a strategist. He knew exactly what made this system tick. Trust, image, and information. You need 3 things, he said, circling the board with a pen. Support, a public counterstrike, and a trap. We started with the first step, regaining investor trust. Lucas made calls in the middle of the night to 3 key neutral shareholders. People who had supported my grandfather for over 2 decades. They were hesitant, concerned, but Lucas had a way of making people listen. He promised they'd see the full picture before the vote took place. Tomorrow you'll sit down with them, share your vision. But first, we need to shift public opinion. How do you plan to do that? I asked. Lucas gave a sly smile. With the very weapon Douglas used against you, media. The next morning I walked into the city's largest broadcasting station, ready for a live 20-minute interview. The host was known to be sharp, someone who had interviewed CEOs of major corporations, and wasn't afraid to ask hard-hitting questions. I didn't dodge them. I sat up straight, looking directly into the camera when she asked, Olivia, many people say you're just a young heiress, unqualified to run a corporation as large as Carter Holdings. How do you respond to that? I took a deep breath. I wasn't born to run this company. I was chosen. By the man who built it from the ground up, who understood every number, every decision, every value behind it. I understand that youth invites doubt, but I'm not here to prove I'm better than anyone. I'm here to say this clearly. I'm not trying to take anything. I'm protecting my grandfather's legacy and the company that thousands of employees count on. I laid out a clear 3-year growth plan, discussed the tech strategy my grandfather had left behind, and introduced the advisory team he personally selected. No flair, no boasting. Just the truth. The reaction on social media was unexpected. The clip went viral within hours. Supportive comments flooded in. Small shareholders sent encouraging emails. Some investors called the office asking for the development plan I had mentioned. Lucas sipped his tea and nodded. Good. You've started to earn back trust. Now comes step 2. Lucas and I met with the 3 key shareholders in a private conference room at a hotel. They entered cautiously, but after an hour, when I presented the evidence Lucas had uncovered, including leaked emails from Douglas promising a potential partner that he'd sell company assets for quick returns, they were no longer skeptical. Douglas isn't acting in the company's interest, he's acting for his own wallet, I said bluntly. And if the board hands him control, the entire firm will become a short-term profit machine. Lucas concluded, We're not asking you to back Olivia because of her bloodline. but because of strategy and long-term protection of your own investments. There was a long pause, then, one by one, they nodded. I knew the storm wasn't over, but I was no longer alone. That night, I returned home, the home my grandfather left to me, and for the first time in weeks, I turned on the living room light without fearing who might be watching. I stood in front of his portrait and quietly said, "I haven't won yet, but I'm ready for tomorrow." Because tomorrow, I would walk into the boardroom, where the vote on my fate as CEO would be held. And I would not let Douglas or my mother take what my grandfather entrusted to me. That morning, the sky was overcast. Thick gray clouds stretched across the city, as if signaling a storm was coming. Not outside, but inside Carter Holdings headquarters. I entered the grand lobby with a steady gaze, no more pitying or skeptical looks. Every employee was silent, but the way they nodded slightly as I passed said it all. They were watching. They were waiting. And I knew. Today wasn't just a board meeting. It was a battle. The boardroom was packed. All 12 seats around the large table were occupied. Lucas sat on my left. Across from me were Douglas and my mother, both trying to look confident, but their tense faces betrayed their unease. The interim chairman of the board, Mr. Grayson Holloway, a seasoned executive who had worked with my grandfather for over 20 years, tapped his wooden gavel lightly on the table. "Let's begin," he said sternly. "The purpose of today's meeting is to vote on the proposed change in the CEO position. Those bringing forth the proposal, Douglas Grant and Miss Laura Carter, will speak first." Douglas stood, adjusted his tie, and smiled, as though he were about to accept a medal of honor. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are all aware that the company's current situation is fragile. In the short time recently, stock prices have fluctuated erratically, media coverage has caused confusion, and there are signs of internal division. All of it stems from a lack of experience in the current leadership." He turned toward me with a faint smile. "Olivia is a talented young woman. But this is not a playground. Carter Holdings needs someone seasoned to lead. I'm not here to take over. I'm here to save." I didn't move. Then my mother spoke. Only one sentence. "We just want what's best for the company." Grayson nodded and turned to me. "Olivia, do you have anything to present before the vote?" I stood up, opened my leather case, and pulled out a neatly bound report. I handed a copy to each board member. They began flipping through it. "I agree," I began, my voice steady. "Carter Holdings needs a leader who thinks about the future, and for that reason, I cannot allow Douglas Grant, the man sitting here, to continue sabotaging this company from within." The room froze. Douglas flinched slightly, trying to stay composed. "What nonsense are you spouting?" "I have proof," I replied, walking to the projector. On the screen, I opened a set of legally verified emails. Douglas contacted a foreign partner, Mr. Martin Kessler, offering to sell Carter Holdings' strategic expansion plans into the Asian market. I pointed to a section of the email and read aloud. "If things go smoothly and I take control, we can begin transferring data and resources as discussed. Olivia won't be able to hold out for long." A board member spoke up. "He was planning to sell the company?" "Worse," Lucas said, his voice sharp. "He was planning to manipulate the company's value to spark panic among investors, then buy up shares at a discount." Douglas jumped to his feet. "You don't have the right to slander me like this." I looked at him, my gaze ice cold. "We don't need to slander. You did that to yourself." I returned to the table and placed an additional investigative report in front of Mr. Holloway. "We've verified that all negative media articles originated from an IP address linked to Douglas's personal email account." The board murmured. A few members looked at Douglas with visible disgust. Mr. Holloway tapped the gavel once more. "Order. I believe, no more words are necessary." Douglas tried to shout. "She made all this up. This is a setup. She's just a kid." "I am a kid," I said slowly. "But at least I didn't betray the company I serve." Mr. Holloway stood, his eyes sharp. "Douglas Grant, You have severely violated ethical standards and confidentiality agreements. I call for an immediate vote. One by one the hands went up. Not a single vote against. Not one abstention. Grayson turned to me. By decision of the board, Ms. Olivia Carter will continue to serve as Chief Executive Officer of Carter Holdings. Douglas Grant is hereby suspended from all positions and barred from company premises, effective immediately. I exhaled, not from joy, but from the relief that the truth had finally prevailed. Security was called. Douglas resisted, shouted, but no one looked at him anymore. My mother said nothing, her eyes no longer filled with rage but with disappointment and bitterness. As they left, Lucas gently tapped my shoulder. "You did it." I nodded, clenching my fist. 1 year passed. Today, I stood before hundreds in the main auditorium of Carter Holdings, the very place that had once been a battlefield, the place where I nearly lost everything, but also where I learned to stand tall, to lead. Spotlights shone on the stage, and around me were members of the press, investors, strategic partners, and employees from every department. Below the stage hung a large portrait of my grandfather, the man who believed in me before I believed in myself. I took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium. Exactly 1 year ago I stepped into the role of CEO of Carter Holdings. Met with criticism, doubt, and even mockery. They said I was too young. They said I lacked courage. They called me the lucky granddaughter who inherited everything. But they forgot one thing. Resilience has no age. The room was silent. I continued, my voice clear. I didn't come here with decades of experience. I didn't come with a sparkling resume. I came with preparation, with passion, and above all, with the responsibility to protect a legacy. And I swore that even if I had to walk alone, I would not let anyone destroy what my grandfather spent a lifetime building. I paused, then looked toward the front row, where Lucas Sinclair sat with his hands folded, nodding gently. This past year wasn't easy. We had to cut budgets, restructure our executive team, endure media pressure, and face skepticism from even those closest to us. But I never stepped back. And I wasn't alone. I pointed toward the board members. We fought together. Not for glory, but for the future of Carter Holdings. And today, I'm not here to talk about challenges, but about results. The screen behind me lit up, displaying clear numbers. Revenue up 12%. Profit margins at a 5-year high. 3 strategic contracts signed with international partners. 98% of key personnel retained. Applause erupted, but I wasn't finished. I'm not the most talented person, but I know how to listen. I learn from those around me, I ask questions. And I don't let my mistakes become disasters. I turn them into lessons. I lifted my chin, my eyes shining. What defines a true leader is not power or title. It's the courage to keep going when everyone else turns away. It's holding on to integrity when personal interests try to tear it apart. It's knowing when to be gentle and when to be firm. I could feel the agreement in every glance. No one saw me as a child anymore. My grandfather once told me, a legacy is not about wealth. It's how people remember you when you're gone. And I've carried that with me every day on this journey. The applause grew louder, no longer polite but powerful. I knew I had earned their trust, not with promises, but with results. With the survival of an entire company through crisis. I bowed to the audience and left the stage to the sound of a solemn, triumphant melody. Later, at the celebration, I stood alone on the balcony of the high-rise, looking down at the city lights. Skyscrapers glowing, streets buzzing with traffic. Everything made me feel small, but no longer weak. Lucas joined me, holding a glass of wine. I've seen many CEOs stand on that stage. But none have silenced a room the way you just did. I smiled. That's because I didn't just speak with my mouth. I spoke with everything I've lived through. He nodded. Your grandfather would be very proud. I looked up at the sky, the night sky, no longer as bleak as it had been a year ago. I hope he can see this. Lucas gently tapped his glass against mine. The question isn't whether he can see it now. It's that he saw your potential a long time ago. Long before you even knew you had it. I smiled. No more bitterness. No more anger. Just relief. And gratitude. 1 week later, I was honored by Forbes magazine in their list of 30 most influential CEOs under 30 in America. Beneath my photo was the headline. Olivia Carter. From the girl they doubted to the one redefining young leadership. I didn't need that title to prove anything anymore, but I knew it would inspire others like me. Young, underestimated, but not easily broken. Because, more than anyone, I understood. Success doesn't come from age. It comes from preparation, perseverance, and the refusal to back down in the face of adversity. Olivia's story is a powerful testament that success is not about age or status. It is about preparation, unwavering resolve, and the ability to stand tall in the midst of challenges. In a world often swayed by power and prejudice, she proved that integrity and genuine effort can outshine any scheme. This was not just a battle to reclaim a legacy, it was a journey of self-worth and self-definition, one that any of us can learn from and follow with confidence. What do you think about Olivia's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life, family, and the lessons that shape who we are.